Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Chosen Scoop. I'm Jim Luff, Marketing Manager for Chosen Payments. Today, joining me on The Chosen Scoop, I have Noe Lopez Jr., or the second, of Saxet Funeral Home, located in Corpus Christi, Texas. And Noe, glad to have you on The Chosen Scoop today. How are you?
Good to be here. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Well, all's good here in California, and it's 8:30 in the morning here, 10:30 where you are.
Yeah.
But anyway, we use the Chosen Scoop to feature some of our valued merchants and to learn a little bit more about your business and specifically, Noe is obviously in the funeral industry, which we find to be quite a fascinating industry, and I think that most people. Kind of have a fear of death and funeral homes. And, it's a profession that is definitely walking a different beat. And so I'm sure all of our viewers would like to know, Noe, how did you get into the funeral industry?
Well, that's a good question, Jim. It's always been a part of my life. Uh, you know, I but never knew it. As a young man, I grew up being at my dad's office. He officed out of a funeral home, and he ran a limousine company uh, since 1979. And I spent a lot of my younger days there, and had no idea it was a funeral home. Just knew that that was my dad's office, and he did limo business. And so from the funeral home, we moved over to the airport, and then we were there for pretty much the beginning of the 90s to the mid 90s. And then we moved to our current location, which is not too far from the airport. And one day I expressed interest to my father about wanting to take over the limo business. And he told me, son, this really isn't a business that I would want you to be involved in. It's, very strenuous. It's very, difficult. It's seasonal with weddings and proms mostly being on the weekends. And so I told him, well, what do you do Monday through Friday? He goes, well, we normally offer limo services to every single funeral home in the whole entire South Texas area. But, in the past years, they have been acquired by corporations which are providing their own limos to the funeral homes. And so my dad was kind of looking for an exit to the limousine business. And I said, well, um, I think that what you're telling me is that funeral homes are an essential part of owning a limousine business, and if you don't have any funeral homes to service Monday through Friday, it's very hard, especially on the off season. So I expressed to him that maybe we should look into opening up our own funeral home, so that way we didn't have to worry about getting undercut from up and coming limousine companies going to the current funeral homes that we were servicing. And so he looked into mortuary school. And originally it was just going to be me going to mortuary school. And he got to talking to the dean of the college, San Antonio College. And during this time period, which is around 2000, 2001, the show 6 Feet Under was a big success. And so there's a lot of interest in the funeral industry. And so the dean began to tell my father that they just recently decided on opening up a Tuesday, Thursday class for funeral directing only. And my dad said, you know what? Um, Go ahead and sign my son up and sign me up. We're both going to go to school together. So he commuted every Tuesdays and Thursdays from about 2002 to 2004. And he graduated in 2004. I graduated in 2005. I did an extra year for embalming. And the first day of mortuary school, they throw you into a funeral home to see whether you are going to make it. And I decided to uh, give it a shot and see, what the first day held for me. my mentality at the time was, I don't know if I'm going to like this. I don't know if it's going to be for me, but I most definitely want to keep the limousine company afloat and was willing to diversify and do whatever it took to make that, possible. So, first day of mortuary school, my duties were to report to a funeral home and basically do whatever they had going on that day, which uh, my duty was to receive a young gentleman that had passed in middle school. He died of respiratory failure in PE, and my job was to get him dressed. And I said, well, that's pretty, you know, um, pretty easy for my first day, but I didn't know how I was going to respond to initially working with, somebody so young and that being my first day. And so I was tasked with getting him dressed, placing him in his casket, and having him in state ready for his family to see him in a few hours. It came to the point to where we were working on his hair, and the funeral director was defaulted to want to brush his hair straight back. And I questioned him about it. And I said, "Hey, is this how he did his hair?" And he goes, "Well, he's a young man. Uh, this is basically the go-to hairstyle." I said, "Okay, you're the expert here." A few minutes later, the original funeral director that made arrangements with the family came in and said, I just got off the phone with the family. They are on their way. Mother just informed me that the her son would spend 30 to 45 minutes doing his hair every single morning. His routine was he would get up early enough to get dressed, do his hair, and when he had time left, he would lay down, take a nap, and he would wait for his younger sister to wake him up to go to school so they can work together. So she said his hairstyle is forward and up. I don't know what that is, she told me. I said, well, I do my hair that way. If you give me an opportunity, I'll be more than happy to do his hair. And she looks at me and she goes, this is the first time she saw me. So she was like, who are you exactly? And I said, well, I'm Noe and I'm a student here for the day. And she goes, well, hesitantly, she just gave me all the supplies and, wished me luck and stepped out. So I completed the task of doing his hair. And as I stepped away from the casket and started to walk towards the door, the mother and the funeral director walk in, and the mother makes eye contact with me. At that moment, I had never had any interactions with, you know, families of the recently deceased. So I didn't know how to compose myself. I didn't know where to begin. So she looks at me, then she looks at her son, and she just let out the a sound that it still shakes me to this core, shakes me to the core to this day. Um, and she started yelling and screaming, and I found a place to hide real quick because I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know what to do or what to say to her. I just, as a student, I wanted to get as far away and hide. And I left them alone, and maybe about 20, 30 minutes later, the funeral director comes and tells me that the family, the mother particularly, was asking who had did her son's hair. And she goes, ma'am, I apologize. What can I do to make it right? What's she expected the worst. And she goes, I just want to know who did my son's hair. She goes, ma'am, the gentleman is a student. He is not an employee. He's only here for the day, and actually, he's leaving in a few minutes. And I said, what does she want? And she goes, well, she wanted to know who you were because she wanted to say that you did her son's hair exactly the way he would do it every single morning. And he was in the casket wearing his school uniform. And so she said that he looked like he was waiting for his sister to wake him up to go to school.
Wow.
And when she told me that, I was already signing off for my day and filling out my paperwork. And I said, what a great feeling that gave me. So that gave me the first inkling that was, this was going to be a good, venture for me. 2 weeks later, I'm at another funeral home, working a funeral service, and I receive a call from my mom, and she tells me, "You'll never believe who I have here." I said, "Well, who?" And she goes, "Well, it's this family, and they're from San Antonio, and they're here to rent a limo for a quinceañera." I said, "Okay, well, I don't really know who they are." And she goes, "Well, let me tell you what happened." She goes, "This family comes down from San Antonio, um, and I got to talking to one of the little girls that was here. And my mom said that she mentioned, that she had a son in San Antonio and going to mortuary school." And the little girl tells my mom, I just buried my cousin not too long ago, like few weeks ago, and there was a student there." And my mom shows them a picture of me, and the little girl immediately, her jaw dropped. She had no words. She gets her mother's attention and points at the picture. And her mother looks at the picture and she goes, "Oh yeah, that was the young man that did your cousin's hair for his funeral service." And when my mom told me that, immediately the hairs on the back of my neck just were
I
on
bet.
attention.
I bet.
And
Well, one thing that I've gathered from all of this, Noe, is and my next question was going to be, what do you enjoy most about your profession? Because we only have a 15-minute show here, but I'm gonna surmise that helping people and serving them in their final moment of existence on Earth, whether it's alive or deceased, you are truly making a difference, not only in their send off, but probably really, really providing a service for the family that allows them to have great closure with the great hairstyle, just as the kid would wear it. I'd say it appears you get great satisfaction from that. Would that be correct?
yes, I take great pride in being the guiding light through people's darkest hours. I mean, it is definitely a undertaking, and it takes a very special person to be able to give those families what they need. Not too many people uh, have it in them to be in this industry, so it is a very I don't take it for granted that I'm doing something that makes a difference and able
That's
to.
fantastic. And speaking of that, obviously, we are coming out of a pandemic right now. But how did the pandemic affect the ability for people to have a funeral for their loved ones? What kind of provisions were made on your side to accommodate?
Well, there was quite a bit of challenges, a lot of unknowns, and first off, the first challenge that we faced was the restrictions in capacity. From one day it would be 50 people, and then the next day it's 10 people. And when you have services already scheduled and they're anticipating that they can have 50 people there, at the last minute it jumps to 10. What do you do? So having to figure out a way to navigate around that and give people the opportunity to say goodbye. Most funeral homes were not able to do that. They were, would allow only 10 people in, and that's it, and that's what they would go with. We would bring 10 people in, and then we would get them to sign a register book, give them information on how to video stream the services, and then we would send in a next group of 10, all at the same time. The family's there. We have a very unique setup in our funeral home where we have a second floor loft that overlooks the entire chapel area. So we were able to separate the family from the immediate public, the general public, and keep them at a safe distance. Still able to be there to receive condolences once the general public made the round, we were able to close down, sanitize, and then bring everybody down in the beginning of when it got bad here in Texas. This was
Wow.
March.
Well, I think it's a fascinating career that you have, and certainly a service that we're all going to need one day in our life. So I certainly appreciate the fact that you've chosen this profession, and it sounds like you're passionate about it. And I can only hope that when my time comes, that I would have somebody as compassionate as you and Saxet Funeral Home take care of me. Let's talk about our relationship with Chosen Payments. We certainly enjoy having you as a client, and we have a large presence in the funeral industry, being an endorsed credit card processor for several different funeral home or funeral director associations. In our relationship, how long have you been a client approximately of Chosen Payments?
I would say roughly since about 2015. We met at a limo convention in Las Vegas, and from there I met a representative, Megan, from Chosen Payments, and she kept in contact and basically was her very words were she wants to put her best foot forward in providing a service that is going to exceed our expectations with merchant processing, and
That
she did. She
and that would be Megan Tucker. And Megan Tucker has the distinction of being the first sales rep ever hired by Chosen Payments. She continues to be a sales rep for us to this day, and continues to be the highest selling and performing sales rep that we have. So I'm glad that you were able to connect with her. Is there any particular moment in our relationship that really stands out for you that you want to share with the audience today that Chosen was involved in?
We were hit in 2017 by Hurricane Harvey, and we have two buildings that are adjacent from one another, one for our offices and one for the funeral chapter. Both of our buildings' roofs folded over, and the chapel got the brunt of the damage. So when we assessed and started to see what we need to do, we realized that all we had left of our chapel were four walls and the foundation. That's it. Everything was just devastated. And in trying to figure out how we're going to continue to do business, the Lord just was able to guide us. And even though that was very devastating, the remodel that we did was nothing that we ever planned for. We would go to try to get permits to do our roof. They said, well, you can't do a flat roof, you have to pitch the roof. And in doing that, we pitched the roof high enough to be able to clear a sixth floor, which gave us the preparations for accommodations for the pandemic. Being able to utilize that for restrictions of only 10 people can be in one place at one time. It gave us that safe barrier of distance to be able to allow the 10 immediate family members to still be there and not have to kick them out or have them come back later to let the general public go through the viewing area. So, Chosen Payments you contacted me and mentioned that you were aware of our devastation here in South Texas, and that you were wanting to reach out to me to provide some relief for that. And you and Chosen Payments came together and raised some money to help us out. That was one of the kindest gestures that we have ever encountered. And
Thank you.
We are very grateful for that, because not too many people contacted us or reached out to us or even gave us the any kind of consideration in going through what we did. And
Yeah, I definitely remember that time period, and we basically took a map from our end and said, okay, let's see how far this storm damage goes, and then let's drill it down by zip code, and let's contact every one of our merchants in those affected zip codes, and make sure they're okay, and make sure that. If they had credit card processing equipment that was destroyed in the storm, that we replaced that for them. I do remember that your circumstance was much more drastic than many of our other merchants, having damage to your building. And while, I know that we weren't able to send a lot of money, we were at least able to send some money to, feed some workers some pizza or whatever.
The phone call, the thought, the gesture, that was beyond what we expected, and just that alone was motivation for us to pick up and go, hey, we really just were surprised and very touched by what you guys did for us.
Well, I'm glad that we were
just the reaching out to us was very warming.
Thank you. I'm glad that we were able to have that effect, and I'm certainly happy to work for a company that's so proactive, that really we have a whole culture in Chosen Payments that you're really not just a number to us. You're an individual. You're a company that we have a relationship with, and we really do pride ourselves on the fact that we don't look at our merchants as simply a merchant ID number. Everybody has a face, everybody has a name, and we try to have relationships like this. So that's one of the reasons why we do the Chosen Scoop. So we have a deeper connection, and we're able to chat face to face. And while we're hundreds of miles apart, if not thousands, we're able to do this, and certainly sitting down to talk with people like Noe is important to us. In parting, because we do need to wrap this up, I'm going to ask, you just seem like such an outstanding funeral director and funeral operator. Do you have any words of advice for your fellow members of the funeral industry that can help them as we're emerging from the pandemic? Any words of wisdom or advice?
Well, I'd like to take some words from one of your representatives, Megan, the top sales person there. Put your best foot forward. Think outside the box. Be honest. Be fair, and always make time for your family. That's the best advice that I can give.
And that is some great advice. You've been watching The Chosen Scoop with Jim Luff and Noe Lopez Jr. from Saxet Funeral Home in Corpus Christi, Texas. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for being on The Chosen Scoop, Noe.
Thank you, Jim, for having me. Appreciate it.